Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here. So a few weeks ago we had the first Battlefield briefing where we found out a bit of information about Battlefield 2042, and since then we've had a lot of questions on our minds, lots of things that the community, including myself, have been asking. So today we finally got some answers from DICE, and this is a pretty lengthy post, so I'm not going to go over absolutely everything. But what they've done is they've done a Q&A essentially. They've taken some of the most frequently asked questions by the community and then they've answered them. And there's a few different categories here. So we've got maps, vehicles, a little section on AI soldiers, and then the technical playtest. And then also we've got some information on the specialists. So I'm going to start with the vehicles because you guys know that's kind of my thing. So the first question here is, how does the vehicle call-in system work? And they say, well, you can still spawn directly into vehicles from the deploy screen. One other important change we've made to accommodate an increased map size is to make it possible for you to call in vehicles when and where you need them. So the vehicle call-in system can be accessed via a tablet interface and is available to all players, as we already know. And no matter which specialist you're playing, you will be able to call in vehicles. And they also go on to say here that use of the call-in system is dependent on the map, the mode, and you will have a specific budget assigned to each team. So as we already thought, you can't just call in, endless amounts of tanks or whatever. There is going to be a tank cap. And once that number of tanks is out on the battlefield, probably some message will pop up saying you're going to have to wait until one of them dies. You still spawn into air vehicles such as aircrafts and helicopters from the deploy screen. So once again, I'd kind of assumed that this was the case, like I talked about in a past video. So that has been confirmed. Most likely you're going to be using aircraft carriers or just, landing strips, helipads, that sort of thing. And then once you've called in a vehicle, you will incur a cooldown, so everybody has a fair chance to call in support. So this is actually kind of interesting. You are still going to be calling vehicles from the deploy screen as well as this in-game tablet mode. And although it does say that the helicopters and the aircraft are going to be called in from the deploy screen, I'm not sure if you're also going to be able to get tanks that way or not. So next question is, do the factions have their own vehicles? And the answer to this one is yes. The iconic vehicles we've come to know and love will still be faction specific. So the NOPATS task force that you follow in Battlefield 2042 will team up with either Russia or the US depending on the location in the world. What this means is that you will get to utilize either the iconic Russian or US hardware as you go into battle. And they say here, as an example, for tanks, Russia will get to play with the T-28 versus the M1A5 on the US side. You can also still expect to encounter vehicles that anyone can play with, such as the MD-540 Nightbird helicopter, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is essentially the Little Bird, or the EBAA Wildcat heavy ground vehicle. So that's probably this vehicle that we saw in the trailer here that has the HMG on top of it and it's got like a specialized gunner. So next question is, will there be naval vehicles and sea warfare? And the short answer to this is no. So they say here you can expect to see naval-oriented vehicles such as the LCAA hovercraft. However, there isn't a focus on naval-specific warfare right now. So it sounds like it's going to be basically the same as in Battlefield 3. There will be boats, like rib boats and that sort of thing, maybe with a little minigun on there or some sort of weaponry. But there isn't going to be any attack boats, anything like that, like we've seen in Battlefield 4. So that's kind of a bit of a letdown, but they do go on here and say, we've seen your comments about how excited you are about naval warfare, so stay in touch with us about what you'd like to see in the future. Now, some people have speculated that naval warfare may be added down the line as part of the live service. That certainly could be a way that they can flesh out the lifespan of the game, adding in water maps down the pipeline and adding in naval warfare. Okay, next up we've got some information about the specialists. So since we learned that the RPGs were equipable on any specialist, a lot of people started worrying about, RPG spam. Will we get stingers? Will there be stinger spam? How is this all going to work? So your customizable loadout that is outside of your trait and your gadget as a specialist are 4 different things. You've got your primary weapon, your secondary weapon, your equipment, which will be a medical crate, a supply crate, an RPG or a stinger, something like that. And then you have your throwable, which is like a frag grenade, an incendiary, or the C5 explosive, as they're calling it. So here's an example. Here is what a customized loadout could look like. Primary weapon, M5A3 assault rifle, a supply crate as your equipment, a secondary weapon could be the G57 as your sidearm, and then a throwable could be the frag grenade. And leading on from that, one of the questions here is, will all players have RPGs, SRAWs, and SMAWs? Now, it's interesting that they put the word SRAW in here because, I mean, that is part of the question asked by the community, but the fact that they put that in there kind of maybe leans a little bit to the fact that that could be in the game. Anyway, I guess we'll see soon enough. So the answer to this one is all specialists now have the ability to fully customize their loadout, which means you have to make a choice about your focus on the battlefield. For example, you could opt for a Carl Gustav M5, which is an unguided rocket launcher effective against vehicles at mid-range. Or would you instead like an anti-air approach via the FIM-33AA missile, which I assume is the Stinger in this game? Choosing a more explosive approach for your equipment slot would mean you won't be able to carry a medical crate or a supply crate, and thus leaves you without health or ammo replenishing options, so choose wisely. And they go on to say, whenever we introduce a feature such as loadouts, we also think about balancing the individual mechanical elements such as missile ease of use or range and effectiveness against vehicles or infantry. We then also introduce counters and scenarios, such as against rocket launchers, where you may have been better off picking something else. Battlefield is all about player choice and freedom to play however you want, and your decisions are vital to your squad and ultimately your team's success. So basically, it sounds like what they're saying is, you know, if everybody's going to be able to take a Stinger and it's going to be a lock-on weapon, they're not going to be overpowered. You're not going to be able to just two-shot a vehicle out of the sky. At least I hope that's the case. They're literally saying here that they are taking those kinds of things into consideration. Hopefully they're going to do a better job with this than they did with their passive and active radar missiles, though, because they have way too much range and are far too easy to use for their effectiveness in Battlefield 4. So I really hope that they've seen, I don't know, somebody's video, maybe not my video, but somebody's, and they've taken that feedback on board. Next question is, can squads use any combination of specialists? So they say, in Battlefield 2042, a squad will consist of a maximum of 4 players, and in Conquest and Breakthrough, squads can contain more than one unique specialist. So basically, yes, you can have more than one of the unique specialists. So if you want to play as Maria Falk, and I want to play as Maria Falk, and we are on the same squad, that's absolutely fine, although they do say here that this is only for Conquest and Breakthrough at the moment, so it could be that some other game modes down the line have some limits. And then leading on from that one, a lot of people have been wondering, you know, how can you differentiate between specialists on your own and the enemy team? If you're both the exact same specialist, aren't you going to look the same? And they've confirmed that they're bringing back the normal colours that we have. You know, your team will be blue, your squad will be green, the enemy will be red. Those colours will make a return and help you to differentiate between a friendly combatant and an enemy. And then there are also other options and systems that are still testing that will assist you in distinguishing enemy players on the field. And then, of course, they go on here to say that customization is a big part of the game, and there are a ton of skins and customization options. So, you know, my Maria Falk and your Maria Falk could look vastly different from one another. Next question, is Ranger a trait or a speciality? So I think we all assumed that the Ranger was the equipment, like one of the global equipment options that you could equip on any specialist, but it seems that that is actually not the case. So they say we can confirm that Ranger is neither a speciality nor a trait, and it will be available to every specialist. Everybody has the opportunity to call them in when in need of support. However, when you make that choice, you are choosing Ranger over other options available within the call-in system. So it doesn't seem like it's actually one of the equipments like the RPG or the Stinger. This is some sort of a call-in option. It's not clear whether this would replace your vehicle. So maybe if you call in the Ranger, you can't call in a tank or a transport vehicle. I'm not exactly sure if it's in the same sort of menu or a different one, but everybody will be able to call this thing in. They also expand a little bit on exactly what the Ranger will do, and they say that Ranger will follow and protect you and even put your life above their own. You'll also be able to issue orders such as scouting a location, having them return to you and follow you, and if this situation becomes dire, you can also command the Ranger to self-destruct. So I can definitely see some scenarios where you just send the Ranger into an enemy squad and just tell it to self-destruct. And they also confirm, yes, before you ask, you can place a C5 explosive on Ranger and then send them into the enemy squad. So forget Jihad Jeeps, Jihad Ranger, that's going to be the future. Alright, moving on, we have the next section, and that is maps. So the first question here is, how does clustering and sectors optimize gameplay in Conquest? So they say here, for Conquest, we've made 2 distinct gameplay changes for Battlefield 2042 that will optimize larger scale battles while preserving the classic essence of the experience. And the first is called clustering, and we've introduced this to create deliberate areas of activity and capture areas for players to engage with. And the second is called sectors, which changes how players gain control of an area. So in order to successfully capture the sector, teams must seize and maintain control over all flags within a sector, otherwise it will be treated as a neutral and contested area. So here's an example of more fluid and targeted combat in a Conquest match. You're attacking a sector and you capture the first flag. Previously, you and your squad would immediately be on the move toward another flag, but due to the Conquest changes in BF 2042, you've now established a foothold in the sector, and you can spawn and confront the enemy to take further flags. This creates a higher intensity fight for the full sector. Only when the full sector has fallen do you make the decision on where to go next. This reduces the back and forth running between flags and puts focus on the sector itself. And lastly, different game modes will use different areas of our large maps. For example, when playing Conquest, you'll fight on certain areas of the map that aren't available in Breakthrough and vice versa. This is one of the strengths of our massive play spaces, where different game modes bring more variety of experiences. So I really like this. This is one of the things that I loved in Battlefield 3. The rush maps often had areas that you didn't fight over in the Conquest version of the map, whereas Battlefield 4, it just kind of felt like they'd repurposed the Conquest map, and each Conquest flag had been a little sector for the rush MCOMs. So that's really good to hear. Next question is about optimization and differences between the 64 and 128 player experiences. So that is to say, if you're playing on current gen, I guess we should say now, or last gen consoles. So the general gist of this one is, whatever platform you're playing on, you're going to have the same weapons, vehicles, specialists, gadgets, the maps, everything will be the same, the dynamic weather will be the same, the tornadoes, the environmental hazards like EMP storms, all of that stuff will stay the same. The main differences between console generations is that we've made adjustments to the playable area on the maps to ensure a fluid play experience for Xbox One and PlayStation 4. So the gist of it is basically smaller maps and less players, but outside of that, you should be able to experience everything in the game that current gen players do as well. Now this next question is interesting, kind of ties into the vehicle play, and it is, how does increased map size impact limits such as going out of bounds? So they say, we have taken on board feedback from past titles where the airspace is considered to be too cramped and expanded upon this to allow for more dogfighting scenarios. So everyone's experienced that dogfighting moment where you crash into the sky ceiling. That's pretty much the end of the dogfight if that occurs. And they say, with the improvements made towards map scale, you can expect to be running or driving much longer before you hit an out of bounds warning. So that's good news. Okay, so the next section is about AI soldiers. Now these questions are quite lengthy, but they can pretty much be summed up in one-word answers. But there is an interesting one here, and it's, how will AI soldiers actually play on the battlefield? So AI soldiers are intended to play the game like you would play it yourself. However, they are not designed to be specialists and cannot use traits and specialities such as, the wingsuit and things like that. You will see them undergoing certain tasks such as using the vehicle calling system and engaging with vehicles or capturing objectives. Whilst they can't use the wingsuit, they do have the intelligence to decide between engaging with you via enemy fire, flanking, throwing grenades, or even reviving a downed squad mate. So next question, can you completely opt out of using AI soldiers? No, you can't. Next question, since AI soldiers can be used in solo mode, does that mean I can play offline? And the answer to this one is also no. Battlefield 2042 is a multiplayer only experience, and even if you're playing in solo mode with AI soldiers, you're not going to be able to play offline. And finally, we have a small section about the technical playtest. Now, this playtest was supposed to be taking place right now, in fact, at the first half of July, and apparently they have put that on the back burner until later on in the summer so that they can test out crossplay functionality. So they say we are still building crossplay functionality, and the first opportunity for us to test it with a wider invite-only group will be within the technical playtest. So right now we'd like to give you an understanding of what we're looking to achieve as final functionality beyond the technical playtest. So here's an overview of what you can expect that to look like. So basically PC, Xbox Series X and S, and then PlayStation 5 consoles, they will be in a crossplay group together. And the PC and consoles can opt out from playing together. So if you don't want to play in crossplay, you know, you're on PC, you don't want to play with console users, or vice versa, you can opt out of that. And then Xbox One and PlayStation 4 will play together. Obviously, they can't play with PC, since it will be a smaller map size and a smaller player size. Next little tidbit though here is cross progression. Apparently they are working on building cross progression into Battlefield 2042, so if you play on console or PC and then you pick up a copy of the game on the other platform, you will be able to carry over your progression. I can't tell you the number of people who have come over to Battlefield 4, for example, onto PC from console, and they're really bummed out that, you know, they couldn't carry over their progression and they have to go and unlock everything for the game again. So that's awesome news. So that's about it for the video, guys. If you're interested to read the entire thing, I will link it for you down below. There are questions in there that I didn't include in the video because, well, some of them are about penguins, and I don't know, if you're into penguins, then I recommend going and checking it out. All in all, I think this is some decent information. I'm a little bit bummed out about the lack of naval warfare, but to be honest, given the fact we hadn't heard anything about it yet, I'm not utterly surprised. Hopefully we will get it further down the pipeline with the live service. But the cross progression thing is really good. I think the crossplay is also a really good thing. And then the fact that they are actively working to balance, you know, every single soldier having access to an RPG or a Stinger is certainly comforting news as well. So let me know, guys, what are your thoughts down in the comments below. I'll be down there chatting with you guys. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.